All right, you're listening to and watching for some of you another episode of the CTO Advisor Podcast. I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing Gene Kim, author of famously The Phoenix Project, The Unicorn Project. These seminal pieces of, in some cases, fictional work. Gene, I gotta admit, some of these stories they didn't sound fictional to me, but we'll get into that. He has been a huge proponent of DevOps for years. He's been the CTO of Tripwire for 13 years. His books have sold well over 1 million copies. He's a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Gene, welcome to the podcast.
Keith, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on. And so many of your guests are friends of mine. And I've just recently heard the interview you did on the Deloitte podcast, hearing about like how easy it is to use GPUs some days. So great to have me. Great to be on. Thank you.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of talking to some seminal folks. The Deloitte project was one of my favorite because I'm from historically PwC. So I've never thought that I'd be on a podcast with Deloitte, my number one competitor and enemy when I was at PwC. But it was a really, really great time. I've been looking forward to this conversation. We've been working for a couple of weeks to get this scheduled. We got it scheduled. No specific topic, but I'm going to start the conversation out with some of the pre-chatter that we had before we hit record. And that is, you have two options. You can put some of your smartest people on the challenge of moving legacy applications out of VMs and putting them into the public cloud. Or you can get them started on Gen AI projects and helping the organization, get started. And I think DevOps, from the high level umbrella, these folks that we give the challenge of implementing platform groups, DevOps programs, they're the same folks. What's your experience in having the conversation around kind of this precious resource of my smartest people?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. What a great question. Can I just sort of like mentally rewind my kind of head and just kind of piece together like an answer, because I suspect it resonates with your own journey. So I remember going to my first DevOps event in 2010. I got an email from John Willis and Damon Edwards. So they were running the first DevOps days in Mountain View, California, and that was like right a couple of months after the first DevOps days that was in Ghent that Patrick Dubois ran, and it was just it was incredible. I mean, it was just, I immediately knew I had found my tribe. I've been studying high performing technology organizations for 25 years, and it was typically focused on like the operations and infrastructure folks and information security, and I sort of knew that there was this kind of a dev component out there that was like a big piece of the puzzle, but I could never find the people who were sort of like-minded, kindred spirits, and then to show up there, right? And it's, I would say probably 50-50 developers, operations, and infrastructure. And it was just, I knew from the first 5 minutes, like, oh my gosh, I've found my tribe. It was Patrick Dubois with the kickoff address, and they were showing the I Love Lucy episode, eating the chocolates off the assembly line, when the assembly line was faster than what, Lucy could handle. Anyways, it was just so fun chronicling and capturing, just being able to hear all these talks about like these people doing 10 deploys a day, right? Doing crazy things that were unthinkable, right? And so it was my observation that it was really the kind of the best technical people, the best leaders who were kind of driving the charge. And that was in the tech giants, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, later Microsoft, and it was all the startups, Yelp, and, all these kind of exciting startups. I mean, Lyft and Uber at the time, and driving these, they were sort of pioneering these patterns. And you're right. It's also been my observation that, of these people I've studied now for, 10, 15 years, it was really surprising to me that those people are still driving large, these transformations in large, complex organizations, but they're also, a quarter of them are leading, these Gen AI pilots. A friend of mine, Brian Scott, he's a principal engineer, a principal architect at Adobe. He co-leads the Gen AI rollout and governance programs. And so, imagine there's like 5,000, 10,000 creators at Adobe, right? And their job is to sort of maximize liberty, but also maximize responsibility. Go as fast as the business needs, but make sure that the risks are managed. And so they're working across this vast cross-functional team. Legal, compliance, information security, dev, ops, infrastructure, platform teams, trying to figure out like, all right, how do we take appropriate risks, and let developers and creators do what they want, and yet make sure that they're not, injecting existential risk into the organization. At Vanguard, right? There's they have this enterprise-wide, now I would call it distributed experimentation, at scale, right? It's not one person, trying to decide what to do. It's like, hundreds, if not thousands of people sort of like trying to figure out like what, given these kind of exotic new technologies, how do we actually make these work for us? Hey, I got to share with you one other. A friend of mine, Dr. Topo Powell, he's at now Fidelity. And he was, like many organizations, everyone's driving these pilots to try to figure out like what are these good for and what aren't these good for. A friend of mine, he said their first pilot with these like coding co-pilots like did not achieve its goals, and they had to shut it down because on the one hand, junior developers were able to be more productive and check in more code, but it put this huge burden on the senior developers who had to review it and say, oh my gosh, this is not fit to deploy and run in production. So that's not sustainable. That's not tenable. And so I think we're just still at the very early stages of learning kind of like, okay, how do we make this work, not just for side projects, but, for, teams, tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people. It's just a fun time to be in the game. Keith, does this resonate with you?
Yeah, it resonates with me. And, you made the point before we hit the recording. I wish we would have hit record because there were some amazing insights in that 5 to 7 minute conversation. But this tangent to the topic of our smartest people being put on some of the hardest problems in the enterprise. What we're noticing, I think collectively, is that this isn't a level 1, level 2 problem. Whether we're talking about DevOps, Gen AI, anything that touches or transforms an organization, these folks need to be skilled in negotiating, compromising, coercing groups that are outside of their direct sphere of influence. So, we're talking about security, compliance, product teams, etc. And one of the things that interests me about some of your speakers for your upcoming show is that these speakers are not concentrated in the Metas, the Googles, the hyperscalers. Talk to me about like the DevOps journey outside of the large hyperscalers.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I have nothing but admiration and respect and appreciation for how the hyperscalers, really pioneered these DevOps principles and patterns. I learned so much from them. But for me, my area of passion for the last 10 years is not studying them. It's really how are these principles and patterns being adopted in large, complex organizations that have been around for decades or even centuries. And so I'm going into year 10 of running this conference called the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and we renamed it the Enterprise Technology Leadership Summit. And we originally called it a conference for horses by horses, no unicorns allowed. And so it's been exciting. It's been over 1,500 leaders, over 700 enterprises across almost every industry vertical. And I was telling you beforehand, right? These are the most amazing, heroic technology journeys and transformations I've ever seen. And so, like the oldest organization that presented was Barclays, a bank founded in the year 1695, which actually predates the invention of paper cash in the West. So, but the absolute oldest organization was UK HMRC, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs Service, founded in the year 1200. And it's just, there's no code that goes that far back, but there's certainly traditions and values and probably, certainly processes that go back centuries. So, it's just been so fun to, help chronicle these journeys, technology leaders giving experience reports on, in a very standard form, which I just love, right? Here's our industry. Here's how we compete in it. Here's the business problem we set out to solve. Here's what we did. Here's what happened. Here's what we learned. Here's the problem that still remain. And I just love that because as adult leaders, as adult learners, we don't learn from people telling us what we think we should do, right? We learn from how other people solve problems, right? And we can often that's the best way to. And then we make a judgment. Did it work for them? Do I like what happened to them? Do they get fired? Do they get promoted? Do they get more budget? Right? And we will, we'll make an informed judgment about how it applies to us. And so that's been super fun. So yeah, we have. It's always been about experience reports, and it's not just DevOps. It's product and technology. It's about information security, compliance. It's about boundary spanning. As you say, it's kind of that layer 3 organizational wiring. Yeah, I think that's what. When people say DevOps is dead, it's like, what? What? No, DevOps is not dead. I don't care about, platform engineering, SRE. Those are all ways that we can help, organizations wire themselves, to better achieve goals, as opposed to silos that are at have an adversarial relationship against each other. And, I think the job of the technology leader is not getting any easier, right? One of the things I learned working with Dr. Steven Spear, who is famous for his work studying Toyota, he wrote the most widely downloaded and read Harvard Business Review article of all time called Decoding the DNA of the Toyota Production System. And that came out in 1999. So we did a book that we worked on it for 4 years. It came out last year called Wiring the Winning Organization. But one of the aha moments that he shared that just blew me away was, the more functional specialties you have, dev, ops, security, compliance, legal, the more sophisticated your organizational wiring has to be. And ours just got a little bit more complicated. We now have prompt engineers, ML ops. We have now yet 2-3 more functional specialties that we got to figure out how to wire into our organizations, right? We got to shift these data scientists way right, maybe even put them on pager duty, which probably may or may not they may be a big fan of, but we know what we learn in DevOps is that that's part of the pattern, right? You build it, you run it. Anyway, so I'm just excited that in a couple of weeks we'll have these kind of great experience reports, but also these experience reports from these same technology leaders sharing what works, what doesn't work in Gen AI. It's just as you said, isn't it curious how some of the toughest challenges are always being given to the these kind of leaders who prove themselves, solving the last problem that came up, which is how do we do this DevOps thing or platform engineering?
So I like to drill into that a little bit because I spend a lot of my time talking and advising folks on patterns that I see. And these patterns can be, witnessed and leveraged, whether you're talking about rolling out DevOps, Gen AI, or any, again, technology that impacts the entire organization. I never thought of the idea that data scientists would have to wear pagers or be on pager duty, but it makes sense, right? When the LLM suggests to put glue on your pizza, someone is getting paged, and the SRE may not be able to necessarily solve that problem. It may need to be a deep functional area like a data scientist. So talk to me about some of these patterns that you've witnessed time and time again in these complex organizations that have to be addressed.
Yeah. I think there's kind of 3. So working with Steve Spear on this, the Wiring the Winning Organization book was such an eye opener because, the question was what's in common between DevOps and Lean and Agile and the Toyota Production System and Lean. And I think I could have given you a kind of a pretty good answer 4 years ago, but I think now, working with Steve, one of the most prominent Toyota researchers there's ever been, we can say concretely, yeah, all those things are incomplete expressions of a far greater but simpler whole. And whenever you look at these transformations and frameworks, there's really 3 mechanisms of performance. One is you have to slow down to speed up. We call that slowification. The second is you have to sort of partition the problem so they're easier to solve, so that you have the right amounts of coupling and coherence. And then the third is you have to sort of amplify even weak signals of failure, so you can detect and correct faster, but ideally prevent, and make sure that you have a culture that enables the accurate and quick transmission of important signals. So I mentioned this just as a way to sort of ground my answer, is that whenever you have these silos, sometimes silos are perfectly appropriate if they don't need to, if they don't have a lot to talk about. But in the case of dev and ops, holy cow, like if you're doing big deployments that when things go wrong could cause chaos and disruption and catastrophe, well then you do need a lot. You need a different orientation for that. It can't be just Jira tickets and handoffs, right? There has to be co-creation, joint problem solving. But there's other times where you don't want a lot of communication and coordination. So you see that in the software architecture. You see that with platform teams, right? It's like, I want to get an environment. I don't want to have to, create a ticket. I don't want to have to get it approved. Like, I want to do it in one click or in the command line. And I think we're still what we're learning is that, we don't know where these new Gen AI pieces fit in, right? What parts can be put into a platform where, I don't want to talk to data scientists and, or which parts do you actually need them in the team? So like when you said, like when someone starts recommending glue on your pizza, it's like, okay, is that a what do we do? In fact, I saw a talk by the engineering lead for the person who owned the ChatGPT team at OpenAI, and he just gave this amazing talk. And he was talking about like having to go deep into not just the Kubernetes cluster, but understand what was happening to the GPUs and how do you ramp capacity. Is there on this rocket ship to 100 million users? I mean, you talk about the domain of full stack just getting even a bit bigger. Like, I don't know, like who signed up for having to go down and actually look at GPU memory utilization, right? But I don't think most people would say that's a reasonable place for most developers to spend time in. So how do we sort of configure our organization so that we're focusing on the business problem? But I was sharing with you the story that I tried to get a GPU instance in the cloud, and it took me 2 hours, and I couldn't even get HTOP to run. And, I screwed up the driver installation. Like, that is not the way I want to spend my time. So it's just an exciting place to be in the game.
It is an exciting place to be in the game. So last question, let's, kind of get a plug in and for your show happening in actually just a couple of weeks. Who is this for? Like, we've talked a lot about, we've talked all the way from GPU installation and driver installation, all the way up to big moving organizational leadership. Where's the sweet spot? Who will be there and what conversations are going to be had?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say the sweet spot for the Enterprise Technology Leadership Summit are technology leaders. So, they typically are, third line leaders or more. So that's like the directors, dev, infrastructure and ops, information security. And it's for anyone trying to figure out how to get better outcomes, right? That feel like DevOpsy like problems or platform engineering or SRE. And one of the things I'm just super excited about is that it's a 3-day conference, August 20th to August 22nd. But day 2 is almost like a single track, 1-day ultimate learning day for Gen AI. And so we're going to have experience reports. Half the talks are from technology leaders from large complex enterprises, and half are from so like, for example, Vanguard and Adobe and Cisco and Adidas. They'll all be sharing kind of like, what have we been doing and what have we learned, what worked, what didn't work. And then the other half are subject matter experts from Gen AI companies. So we have Adam Seligman, he's VP of Developer Experience at AWS, who owns the Gen AI tooling. Paige Bailey, she was one of the senior product leads for Google Gemini, and before that, Palm 2. And so that's super cool. Joe Butler is from OpenAI. And they'll be talking about, like, what do technology leaders need to know, right? How do they make informed decisions on, Gen AI is exciting, but, what can they share in terms of field experiences about what's working, what's not working with their clients? So I think I am super, super excited for this.
And website, where can folks go register for the conference?
Oh yeah, I would say just go to itrevolution.com and just go to events, itrevolution.com/events, and I'll give you a link of like the what to expect, and it's a big blog post I wrote that shared what I'm most excited about for the conference.
And I'll make sure that's in the show notes. For those of you who want to find out more about the CTO Advisor in or Futurum Group, you can find us on the web, thectoadvisor.com, futurumgroup.com for the mothership. But, CTO Advisor is where you go get this deep technical content. I still love the platform and I love the audience. You can find me and engage with me on the Twitters. I guess I should start calling the X.com these days at CTO Advisor. And Gene, are you still on the X.com?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on. I still call Twitter at Real Gene Kim, and yeah, I still. Man, talk about Gen AI. It's probably one of the best places to learn about that. I mean, it's ridiculous just how much you can learn just through it. Absolutely.
All right. Talk to you next CTO Advisor podcast. James, thanks for joining us.
Keith, thank you for having me on, and keep up all the great work.